When I think about amazing watch dials, Seiko comes to mind. Straight away I think they offer some amazing watches with amazing watch dials. But then I think about Grand Seiko. They're sort of next level watch dials. I also think of a couple of micro brands that really stand out in my mind. But I also think about AddiesDive. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James. You're watching me, and I'm talking about watches, and today I'm talking about a watch which has an amazing dial. A dial that grabbed my attention as soon as I saw it pop up on Aliexpress. A dial that I thought, wow, that's something special, that looks great, but I'm not quite sure if it's going to be as good in real life as it is in the pictures. I didn't end up going and buying it, although I really considered it. So when I was offered the opportunity to borrow it from a subscriber, thank you very much Jason for lending me this watch, I jumped at that opportunity because I really wanted to get this watch in hand. Because when you consider this watch that has this great dial, but also a great case shape, but also the specifications it comes with, and it's powered by a Seiko NH35, and it's only 160 Australian dollars, that sounds like a watch that really should be considered. And guys, if you're interested in this watch after watching this video, I am going to leave one of those affiliate links down below. Now this watch comes in two colors. There's a blue dial and a white dial variation. It's the white dial that really stood out to me, and I've been able to borrow that particular variation, so I'm really happy about that. So let's flip the camera. Let's check out this AddiesDive watch with this rather stunning dial. So on paper, the AddiesDive AD2118 has a huge amount to offer. It's 160 Australian dollars, which makes it an affordable watch. It contains a Seiko NH35 automatic movement, so it has a good, well-known, reliable movement. It has a sapphire crystal. It has this incredible dial underneath, solid bracelet, milled clasp, 100 meters of water resistance. What more could you ask for? But now that I've actually been able to experience it and have it in hand, it goes far beyond that on-paper specifications because it's a really nice watch. That dial, sometimes these sort of dials, these 3D dials, I sort of consider that there's sort of two variations of these sort of dials that have been put out at the moment. There's one set which looks okay, but close up has a very plastic molded look to it. And then there's another set which somehow just works really well. And this one works really, really well. Because not only does it have that initial sort of dimpled 3D effect, but then underneath that is more 3D effect. And the dial isn't specifically white. It's a mixture of sort of a white and silver, and it sort of almost sparkles. And it looks great. And then when you look further at this watch, you'll see there's polished indices that are applied, has a printed dial, dolphin polished hands, and that lovely pop of blue on the dial on that second hand. And these lighter dials with a blue second hand is something that really stands out to me. They've also designed it with some great dimensions. One dimension that makes a little bit of perhaps a negative aspect to this watch, because this one here is a 38.9mm case, which is great, but it is rather thick. It is 14.4mm. And that for me is probably one of the only negatives about this watch, because the lug-to-lug 47.7, which is pretty much my favorite sort of lug-to-lug size, that 48mm, 20mm lug width, and it weighs in at 137 grams. Covering that dial is a piece of flat sapphire crystal, which is very nice. Has this form almost a little bit of a boxed sort of shape to it. I think it's really cool. Transitioning onto a solid polished bezel, which is nice. Brushing and polishing on the sides. It's actually really nice brushing done there. Polishing is really quite nice. We have a screw down crown. It is signed. It's a little bit small, however, so it's a little bit hard to grab onto, but once it pops out, makes it nice and easy to wind up. And of course, being a Seiko NH35, we have hacking as well. The bracelet is actually a bit of a standout feature for me because it's really, really nice and really, really comfortable. Solid edge links that fit perfectly, transition into the case perfectly, brushing with this sort of polishing down the center, this sort of Jubilee style bracelet, which has a lot of movement to it, which really makes it feel a little bit vintage, which kind of suits the sort of style of this watch, or the watch that this watch really is homaging. Quite a bit of taper as well, from 20mm down to around about 16mm, which really gives a nice on-wrist experience. Has split pins there holding the bracelet together, plenty of micro adjusts, brushed, polished, brushed, simple double pusher, all milled inside, and it's actually quite a small clasp, which really then sort of suits this transition of 16 millimeters as well. So a really nice choice of clasp. The back of the case is fairly simple there, has got the AddiesDive logos there, and plus some information about the watch. Now, whenever I borrow a watch, I'd be careful not to resize it because I don't want to damage it. But what I can say is that it fits and feels really nice on my 6 3/4 or around about 17 centimeter wrist. However, you do notice a little bit of that width, but not as much as I would have expected, because looking at it and holding in hand, you go, wow, that's a little bit thick, but on wrist, has a really nice feeling. And this bracelet is a big part of that. It really makes it feel very comfortable and nice on wrist. And looking down at that dial, wow, it looks good. So what do I like about this watch? What don't I like about it? And what would I change? Well, I'm going to say there is a lot to like for your 160 Australian dollars. Great looking dial and done very, very well. I always really enjoy a blue secondhand, especially on a lighter dial, because it really makes a cool little feature to it. And the bracelet is an absolute standout. I really like it, and the clasp is done very well. There's very little that I actually dislike about this watch. There's nothing that I can point to saying I don't like. It really comes down to things that I would change then. The crown is a little bit small and a little bit fiddly. And the thickness of the watch. I know the Seiko NH35 can be a slightly thicker movement. However, I know many watches that contain that movement that are significantly thinner than this. And if this sort of thickness was brought down by about 2 millimeters, this would almost be one of the most perfect watches at this sort of budget. Because at $160, when I first saw that price, I thought, wow, that's really affordable. Perhaps it's not actually going to be that much of a nice watch in hand. Perhaps just the pictures of it, the pictures of that dial make it sort of look cool. But once I had this one in hand and realized that that dial is something special and that the overall experience about this watch is so nice, I'm blown away at that price. And I don't think there's much out there for that same price that you can get as good. There are some other watches on Aliexpress that offer some amazing value, and really, they're the only competitors to this watch. But if you want this dial and this style of watch with this great bracelet, AddiesDive may be worthwhile picking up. And if you're interested in this watch, you may want to check these videos out next.